Despite 2 out of the 5 October reviews being Halloween while the rest aren't, wrapping up this month on the day on Halloween with this episode is mostly justified considering it's been more than 4 years since I last talked about this show, and the fact that I reviewed iCarly, Victorious, Henry Danger most of the time, to the point that it just put Drake and Josh on the shelf for far too long, which is why on the day of Halloween, we're gonna be reviewing Alien Invasion from Drake and Josh. Drake and Josh are furious at their little sister Megan for using Josh's laptop and Drake's leather jacket for basically covering the bottom of Megan's telescope so that it doesn't touch the glass. And with Megan finding a way to get out of trouble by getting Drake and Josh into trouble again, this reached to the breaking point as they came up with a plan by convincing Megan that aliens are going to abduct her. Not really abduct her, but mainly having Megan believe that aliens do exist. The abducting happens towards the end of the episode. Like every other Drake and Josh episode that I've rewatched, this always feels like a dime a dozen in comparison to other Drake and Josh episodes, knowing how great the writing is. With Drake and Josh getting the upper hand against Megan by making her convinced that aliens exist. Honestly, when people do this in the real world, they don't do it to get back at them. They're just doing it just to cheer their younger siblings up. But in this case, since that Megan really bothered Drake and Josh to the point that they are no longer afraid, in comparison to Megan's revenge in season 4, they really have every right to mess with her. I need to point this out since that there's still probably Megan haters out there. Despite reviewing episodes from this show back in 2018 and hating how Megan was portrayed, truth be told, I really don't hate her as much as I used to. In this episode, while she is at her least worst, it always gave me the impression that with how the later entries of the character traits that Megan has get a little too overboard when it comes to future characters, I really feel like that with her being original for how she was executed really makes her character slightly tolerable rather than insufferable. In this episode, while she is so naive on the ideal that aliens do exist, there's still relatability when you were once her age that something like aliens do exist, and it made me convinced that during my childhood that cartoons kind of existed, even though it's really impossible since that they don't exist. And the ideal of what they're doing by having Drake and Josh convincing her that aliens do exist while hiding the evidence, mainly Drake and Josh making alien noises, making them real is really something that Megan, while can make something real against her brothers, is something that she is not immune when it comes to witnessing that it's fake all along, because Drake and Josh's plan was actually being a lot more successful in the fact that they're really cooperating in order to make the plan succeed. And as much as I'm mostly convinced that the reason why that this show didn't get a Halloween episode is mainly on the fact that even in the beginning of this series, Drake and Josh are too old to be going trick-or-treating, but if they're willing to go to a haunted house and Megan ran the haunted house, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna be immune to basically anything that Megan throws at them. Like, the pranks and stuff that Megan did irritated them to the point that what happened in Megan's revenge is mainly what Drake and Josh caused, even though it wasn't intentional, and they only think the worst of Megan when they do stuff like that. So pushing aside the Christmas movie, it kind of makes sense onto why that this show never got a Halloween episode, and especially a Valentine's Day episode, since that there was actually care being put into the show in comparison to future shows involving Shania's Bakery. But we pretty much know how downhill Dan Shania did when it comes to his shows for how long he stays at Nickelodeon. But what he does outside of his shows, behind the scenes, again, I'm still considering on making that video whenever I have the opportunity. So after getting help from one of Mindy's cousins, Drake and Josh are inside alien costumes so real that it paranoid Megan, and when they get close to Megan, they dance in front of her, which is really humorous, and they expose themselves on being fake aliens, and they manage to succeed to the plan on pranking Megan. You may say that the ending of the episode backfired on Drake and Josh, but considering that Megan didn't even realize that all this was a prank, I'm starting to convince that she will probably still do this if she was in the whole thing when it comes to her getting pranked. Like, I'm going to be honest, if Mom and Dad actually found out about Drake and Josh pranking their sister, they would get into trouble. Like, there's literally no difference of them avoiding this. So for how this episode ended with them running away from Danny, who is in a bigger alien costume, they still won regardless. And while Megan gets the final laugh, she didn't take away the victory. So I'm really convinced that Megan was never in on this whole prank. As in, all of this was real to her, and she didn't realize that Drake and Josh were pranking her the entire time. Let's be real. The costumes in Drake and Josh when it comes to making an alien outfit, mainly Danny's alien outfit, is honestly impressive. And I'm pretty sure that it would take a lot of time to put all of this together, and it's only less than 3 or 2 minutes. It's something that will probably be easier when animating it, but with this in live action, there was still difficulties when it comes to live action and animation. I can't deny that this is more expensive to put together, but in comparison to animation, it's a lot more expensive. But there are ways for animators to not do stuff in the episodes that are mostly complicated for them to do. And from someone who actually watches more cartoons than live action, that is saying a lot. It's really hard to not like this episode for how everything was paced and executed. And even though that nowadays it's mostly debatable if a possible Drake and Josh revival is somewhat adequate in the same ways of the iCarly revival, with how Drake Bell and Josh Peck's lives are, especially what Drake Bell went through, including what he did, there's more of a reason onto why it's difficult to consider the idea, but at this point I can't really go against multiple people when it comes to these allegations because there's too much. Not to say that the victims don't deserve justice, I'm just saying. I'll just say there are still episodes from this show that I do want to review. But like every other show, it's not immune to what I'm feeling right now, especially with the schedule being really limited. Just be lucky that I'm doing a weekly upload when it comes to October during the Halloween season, because despite giving up Halloween Mania completely, I'm still continuing Halloween reviews regardless, and what happens next year could be less unless if I find more Halloween/horror material, because after doing so many reviews in the past 1 and 2 years back in 2023 and 2024. Those less material to work with, unless if I look into sitcom Halloween episodes, which is mostly the least of my interest. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great Halloween today, and I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10.